Welcome to World Builders Anonymous. Kick that world building addiction and actually finish that novel with your hosts Vito and John.
I also am now recording.
Awesome. Are you ready to go, or are you just recording?
I'm ready to go, I think.
Ready to go? And then are you ready for this?
I really was, to be honest with you.
Hear the fizz. Do you hear the fizz? A little bit?
It's quite nice. This is now an ASMR podcast.
I don't know what that means.
It's like the thing where you make noises like really quietly and you have like a high quality microphone, and it's like the thing that makes your hair stand up.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
If this was an ASMR podcast, I'd be like, "Hello, everyone. We're gonna have a good time today."
What's the purpose of that?
ASMR is like audio, sensory, motor reflex or something, and the purpose is to make to give you that sensation of your hair standing up or something.
But why would that do that?
It's just I'm not going to explain science to you, Vito.
Email us if you want us to do more ASMR.
No,
and make
don't
your
do
hair
that.
stand up.
Don't do that. Also, you're the only person in the world who doesn't know what that is.
Oh, really? Okay. Email us if you don't know what that was to validate me.
And yeah, whatever. It doesn't matter.
Oh, my gosh.
Sure. So, first podcast in a few weeks. A lot has happened.
Anyway, a lot has happened.
So
oh, my gosh.
I tore my meniscus and had surgery.
Oh, that's
and
right. That
then
happened
subsequently had a baby. Yeah.
Not you, but, yeah.
Well, I was a part of it.
You were there.
I was there.
Yeah, you helped a little.
I held a hand.
Yeah. Did you say push like the push, that kind of thing?
No, I didn't do that. I wasn't Bill Cosby.
No. Yeah. For those of you who don't know what that reference is, it's a 70s comedy special Bill Cosby did.
Yeah. I was very encouraging, though, and then we had a baby. So I'm walking again, which is nice. Got my stitches out of my knee, so I'm good to go.
Is that like 100%?
It's like 80%. I wouldn't go rock climbing yet, but I can jump, so that's fun.
That is fun. Jumping is fun.
I don't have quite full range of movement yet, mostly because there's still incisions and they're not fully healed yet, so I can't bend it all the way. But that's all good. So and then also baby. So yes.
Did they figure out what happened to your knee? Like, why did it do that?
So this is apparently I tore it like 10 years ago. I tore my meniscus, and it's been like getting progressively worse until it locked my knee up and I couldn't bend it anymore. So that was a problem.
Is it
just something that happens?
For those of you who, I don't know if we've mentioned on the podcast before, Johnny's knees used to like pop out of joint or like lock up sometimes.
That's what we thought it was. Apparently it was this.
That's what that was? Okay,
yeah,
interesting.
But just the fragment of the meniscus that was getting caught in the knee joint was not big enough yet to maintain being locked up, so it would kind of fix itself, quote unquote.
Interesting.
And then this time it was just bad enough to where it didn't fix itself anymore and had to get the torn bits taken out. So I'm down some meniscus in my right knee, but it's all good.
Not to beat a dead torn horse, but is there any meniscus left in your knee?
Yes. They don't do full meniscectomies anymore. They do partial ones.
Well, of course.
But that said, it was a substantial chunk they had to take out because it was a pretty big tear. But whatever. I'm walking again, so it's fine.
Okay. Well, cool. Nice. That's awesome. And then the other thing, what was that again? What happened?
Oh, yeah, I had a baby.
Oh, yeah, that thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
how's that going for you?
Little Andy's doing very well. He was born to a sprightly little 6 pounds, 15 ounces. All normal, all healthy. He's doing really good. Gaining some weight now. He's becoming a little more fussy, which is always fun. He's
also losing a lot of weight every once in a while and then gaining it back in the form of pooping all over the place, I hear.
Yeah, we all do.
But it seems like he's doing it like more than most people.
Most of us don't fire the poop out of themselves at tremendous speed and velocity and just force. So that's always fun. He also likes to pee on his own head. when you're changing his diaper, which most of us also don't do.
Well, I guess
That's
when
an
your body
experience.
is so tiny, maybe you have less distance to cover, so it's a little more
Well,
doable.
With how he shoots a good distance, I'll just say that his head could be way farther away.
Okay.
He'd still make it.
Okay.
Jeez.
I guess I used to help with our little sisters. I'm the eldest in our family, and I used to change their diapers, but of course they're all girls. So I have not actually, I'm realizing now, I've never actually changed a male baby's diaper.
I
So
hadn't either,
That
and
must must introduce a whole new set of
There are
challenges.
variables.
Yeah.
There are variables involved. It's a process.
Oh boy. Yeah, I bet.
So,
Well,
yeah.
I'm sure you guys are doing a great job. He's super cute.
He's a cute little bugger.
He looks just like both of us too when we were babies. From what
Yeah,
I've seen
yeah,
so
yeah.
far, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
He definitely has the Godzilla look, and I'm hopefully looking forward to seeing him. Might be Christmas, might be before. Still trying to figure that out. But anyway, maybe
oh,
we'll
also,
yeah.
go ahead.
Maybe we'll
Go
have to put a picture of him on. Did you already put a picture of him on the Instagram?
I think I've put 2.
Okay, cool, nice.
Yeah.
So the people have seen him.
Also, new development since we last talked to you guys. We have new podcast art.
Yes.
Which is quite nice. Oh gosh, I didn't mean to do this. Dang it, Vito, stall for time. Okay,
So-
I'm done. Shout out to the Fiverr seller, I'm King's Fool, for doing the new podcast art. It is exceptionally good, and we're very happy with it. Yeah, that's about it there, but really good service from him, and he did a great job bringing our vision to life. So our podcast is now 200% more attractive.
I think my favorite part is the penguin.
It's such a good penguin.
It's a
I'm
good
so
penguin,
happy with
yeah,
it.
for sure.
That was a first try penguin too.
Oh,
No
yeah.
criticism whatsoever.
Nice. What did we add in our second draft that wasn't there in the first?
The penguin and the violin,
That's right.
and we made our arms less noodly.
Yeah, our arms were originally a little bit stringy, but we're both not. I wouldn't say we're super beefy guys, but we got a little bit of something going on. Yeah, and not just nothing.
Were you talking? I wasn't listening to you.
I will admit, John's arms are a little bit bigger than mine, which I never thought would happen. But he's doing a lot
Well,
more.
it may no longer
lot
be the
more
case
rock
because I've
climbing than
lost
me.
like 10 pounds since the baby was born,
Wow, dang.
which is not supposed to happen.
Well, I got to get back on the horse while I got an advantage. Yeah, nice.
Oh man, I think I just kind of forgot to eat for a while and dropped way too much weight.
I mean, we are
So-
stalling way too long as it is, but I
So,
do want
this
to
is a
ask.
podcast.
I do want
Go
to ask
ahead.
how much you weigh.
Oh, it's like 170, 172 now.
Okay,
I
that's
was
exactly.
I was
what
over
weigh.
180 for a while.
Really? Wow. Yeah, I weigh
And
170 since
I'm no
college.
longer.
Yeah, my entire adult life I've weighed pretty much exactly the same.
Yeah, basically me too.
Yeah. Anyway,
That's
as
not important at all.
scintillatingly and fascinating as that is, we should probably get on to, the thing. We're a little out of practice, I guess. We're have been dealing with all kinds of other things rather than
Well,
writing
and also to be
podcasting.
fair, I've not written in the past little bit because I have not been sleeping very much, and I'm quite busy. So, understandably enough, I don't have a ton to talk about. So, stalling is quite okay. With that said, we did get a listener sent us in their chapter, the first chapter of their novel, which, based on the way she was talking about it, I think is actually completed. The novel. It's like a 90,000 word young adult novel, which is
Like the
very
first
nice,
draft is
well done.
completed, or the whole novel is completed.
It's not clear, but I would think at least the first draft is done.
okay.
So shout out to Katie for that. Her Reddit handle was Katie Eats Cats, which I
Well,
find
that's-
disconcerting and
And a
sad.
bit sad and disgusting, but yeah.
We all have our thing. So I did want to walk through a little bit of this first chapter here.
And she did
not-
give us permission to talk about it on air. as
She
well.
did, yeah. And I don't want to go through it in granular detail or anything, but I did want to highlight a couple of points of criticism that I had, and also a couple of when I do chapter critiques, I like to point out my favorite thing in there. Point out like when you did this, it worked for this reason, and it was really good, and it made me really like it. So I like to do that. I want to point out kind of the things I liked about this. As well as try to shed some light on something that I think we all talk about a lot, which is info dumping, and it's a form of telling over showing. And I think sometimes when we talk about it, we might miss what it actually looks like. And I wanted to point out a couple of examples of that, and maybe a couple ways to get around it in a couple specific circumstances. So, does that all make sense?
Yes.
Cool. So, this chapter opens up on the main character named Seraph.
Oh, sorry, I was just giving you background music.
I appreciate it.
You were supposed to keep going.
I can't.
Totally derailed your train of thought.
So what just happened? So you have Seraph. It's I guess to sum up the premise of this story a little bit, it's basically a Cinderella kind of situation where you have a downtrodden step-sister, daughter thing. Mom's dead. Dad remarried a rich lady, and rich lady has daughters who are mean and preferred over Cinderella, except Cinderella is named Seraph. You basically have enough context to kind of jump in here. Comparisons are nice. So you jump in and you kind of get a little scene in the very beginning with her and her sort of caretaker in this castle. She's sort of a princess kind of character, like much like a Cinderella. Cinderella's not a princess. I'm now realizing. It doesn't matter. Not in the
Disney
beginning,
princess.
Anyway. She becomes a princess, not in the beginning. So she has this caretaker, and they're kind of getting Seraph ready for the day. And the caretaker is tightening Seraph's corset, and it's kind of a painful moment for her. So she kind of focuses. Oh my goodness, focuses on something in the room to distract herself from what's happening, which is fine, obviously. And she notices this tapestry on the wall, which doesn't notice it. It's in her room. She knows it's there. And it's a tapestry of her mother and her father back when they were the ones who were kind of lord and lady over the castle. Apparently there are no more of these tapestries hanging in the castle except for the one in her room, because all the tapestries now depict the new stepmother and her father, which is all fine and good. That's a nice detail to have. But we don't get to see those details as much. Once we see the tapestry, we jump into a description of how silk tapestries like this one had been hung liberally throughout the castle, depicting the former queen leaning over a single stalk of wheat with her hand reaching out as if in worship. All other tapestries, except for this one on her wall, had been burned and replaced with images of the king standing with his hand on the new queen's shoulder. On the new hangings, the queen sat on the throne with the scepter, blah, 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 blah. You get the point. It's 2 paragraphs of a sort of derail from the scene when you're in those, and it's important to note, I think, that you only have a few paragraphs before this in the first chapter. You start the chapter with a few paragraphs of this scene, and then you jump into 2 paragraphs of this description of these tapestries and why they're not hung like this anymore, and why this one is the only one left in existence and whatnot. And that's all fine and good. I found myself, when I was reading it, kind of not caring very much yet. One of the reasons info dumping in the first chapter is a pretty big no is because we don't have the context necessary for us to really care about what's going on yet. The goal of the first chapter, especially really early on, is to get me to really care about your characters and your story and your world, so that I will want to read more about tapestries and who's in charge and why and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, like almost it's more important to get the character's current goal or passion or what they care about in this opening moment out in the open, rather than talking about what led them to this opening moment. And that can be sort of part and parcel of the same thing in some ways, I guess, but it's more important to show ongoing action in the scene that's currently happening, rather than going back and telling a bunch of stuff about the past.
Sure.
And but that is a really good detail to include.
Yes, exactly.
And it would be the perfect kind of thing to include by showing, because if you show, kind of what the tapestry looks like in her room, and then you have her go to some other part of the castle and part of whatever she's doing, just talking to people, accomplishing whatever goal she has right now, and then she, sort of looks up and notices, the tapestry in the throne room or something, and it's got, somebody else on it, that kind of automatically tells you something that you can put those pieces together as the reader. You don't need to be explaining the significance of that necessarily.
And it gives you a chance to show her responding to that as well. When
Yeah.
she sees the tapestry of the new stepmother queen, and she wrinkles her nose in disgust. That tells you something about, the situation we're in and the feelings involved.
Totally. And it's the
that
kind
kind
of
of
thing, and it's the kind of thing that I can totally understand somebody putting into a first draft, because
Oh, yeah.
especially if they're discovery writing, because then all these ideas are occurring to them as they're describing this tapestry. Like, you could not even have meant to include this detail, but then as you're writing the scene, like, this sort of image of this tapestry on the wall pops into your head, and you're like, oh, what's the significance of that? And you kind of come up with this backstory on the fly, which can be really cool, and you just kind of write it down because it's part of your flow, I guess. And I would totally understand that. But then that's something to go back, if it is a first draft, and then kind of weave more subtly into the fabric of the story itself, rather than keeping that info dump kind of as is, the way it was when it occurred to you in your head.
Sure. And to be clear as well, this is not an egregious example of what info dumping can look like in a...
It's just a good
fantasy
concrete, practical example.
Just an example. It can get so much worse. And this chapter that we were sent is actually quite good. I enjoyed reading it, even though it's not my, generally speaking, not my usual reading taste, I guess you could say.
Is it is it young adult in the sort of Twilighty kind of way?
No. It's still much more standard fantasy fare than that.
I'm talking more in terms of the theme.
No, it's not that. Not that at all, really. It's part of the problem with reading just first chapters is sometimes you don't get a very good global sense of, the overall goal of the whole thing. But it seems like it's kind of a character story more than Twilight is.
Okay.
Anyway, so there was one... I don't know if I can work this in very well. There was one example where there was a bit of a... okay, so one thing that this person did a few times in their chapters, they have these flashbacks to a previous time, or just kind of giving you some past information, but they're not worked in terribly well in terms of readability. So you'll have a paragraph that's sort of giving you context or a flashback, and then you have dialogue in the flashback right after that, and then you cut back to present time without any indication that you're coming back, and so it was confusing sometimes.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to know how to do if you have that idea. It's like, oh, I have this clever idea for how to include this backstory into the dialogue and all this kind of stuff. It's like, it's hard to know how to execute that properly without really confusing people or interrupting the flow, yeah.
Yeah, so there's one, this is almost an info dump, and it's part of the sort of flashback thing, but I actually like it. And I want to see if you kind of feel the same way. So one of the conflicts for the main character is that she was kind of going to be the heir to the throne because she was the only trueborn child of the king. But then once the king and the stepmother got together, they had a son. And so now the son is going to be the heir to the throne. He's a baby. So so I'm just going to read some of this. When Gabe was born just over a year before, he was the culmination of everything Seraph wasn't. A soft, cooing babe whose golden hair curled over his bright blue eyes, he was the delight of the kingdom as well as the immediate favorite of the royal family. On the night of his naming, I'm guessing like his naming to the heir of the throne or whatever, Seraph shut herself in her chambers, feigning illness. She could hear the city chanting his name, Gabriel. She knew the sentiment that followed it, the true heir. As fireworks exploded over the castle keep, she pressed her face down into her silken pillows and cried, unable to shut out the noises of the revelry. Now, that's a flashback. That's kind of an info dump because you're trying to explain to us what's already happened to catch us up to where we are now. However, I felt that moment from her character's perspective way more than the tapestry thing before. I felt like that was a much more showing way to get some of that backstory out there.
Yeah, and I wonder why that is. Is it because in the first case, it was the character kind of thinking to herself in the moment, kind of like, oh, this is significant to me because of this reason? And then in the second one, it was her physically remembering something.
Yeah, in the first one, it was more of like the standard history lesson kind of thing, where you're just kind of explaining to us what has happened, and the character's not even involved directly. This one is more of a memory. Her just saying what happened and how she felt about it. Yeah, I don't know. It felt a lot better to me, and I wasn't derailed by this like I was the other one.
Yeah, because there is a certain amount of telling, I guess, if you want to call it that, that is kind of necessary, I think, in certain types of fiction, especially like YA, because, kids are kind of dumb and they need things spelled out for them a little bit more. I don't know. But I do feel like oftentimes in books geared towards younger readers, there's more of that sort of telling going on, but there's also a better and a worse way to do that. And I do feel like usually contextual memory is usually a pretty good way to go about it, as long as it's, appropriate in the scene in terms of what's happening and what triggers it and that kind of stuff, as long as it doesn't seem too forced. I think that's the big thing is not making it forced. Like, okay, that's an interesting thing for you to think about right now, completely out of context, when somebody was just tying your corset and you were probably thinking about something else,
Yeah. And there's a couple more examples of that info dumping that wasn't as good. However, I did want to highlight, to sort of a final thing, some of the my favorite short paragraph from the selection. So I'll just jump into it. Seraph backed away from the conversation. It seemed as though the kingdom she loved, down to the last stalk of wheat, already belonged to her brother. Perhaps if she hadn't been born an Astor or a girl, maybe then she would have had a chance. However, she had been born both, an Astor girl, the worst of the worst. I just thought that was a good paragraph. I like the way it flowed, and I like it's very evocative of the emotion that she's feeling.
Is an Astor a magician of some type?
No, I think it's... I don't fully know, but I think it's a locality. But I don't know that for sure. Maybe it might be some kind of magician thing. I don't really know. But anyway, it's just... That's the paragraph that most got me to feel something for the character and gave me a sense of her situation. She's in a kingdom that she loves, that she can't directly influence anymore, and she feels like she's being kicked out of almost because this brother who's the son of a woman she hates is going to be in charge instead of her, just because he happened to be born a boy when she was not.
Yeah, it's a good example of, I guess, something raising questions. Like, why does she want to be queen, I guess, number one? Is it because she just loves the position, the influence, the status? Does she actually want to affect some sort of change? Does she feel like she could be a force for good? Does she just kind of want to make her dad proud and want to carry on his legacy? Like, that's an interesting question in any sort of situation in which, you have a young person in this sort of situation where there's like this ascendancy to some position of power. They've been kicked out of it and they're all bummed. Like, well, why are they bummed? Why does that make them sad specifically?
Yeah.
And also, what it also kind of makes interesting to me, or sort of raises the question of, is what's her relationship with the brother? Like, of course, she seems to hate the mother for, some reason. And that's another interesting question too. Like, why? Is it justified? Is it not justified? Does she just not like her other mother being replaced? That kind of thing. But, and this is kind of what I've sort of built my story around, is this idea of sibling relationships and sibling dynamics. And I would be interested to sort of know what kind of person her brother is, if he's old enough to be, have any sort of attributes like that. And whether she hates him, or what he represents, or him himself, I guess,
Well, he's a baby right now, so I'm assuming
he's still a baby? Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
But I think there's also an element of, like, he's doted on in a way she wasn't, because he's the new heir to the throne, and when she was born, maybe it wasn't as big of a deal, or, I don't know. There's a lot of potential there, though. So for this chapter, Katie, if you're listening, the main points of criticism were essentially, watch the info dumping. It's really not that bad in this, but there were a few examples that I pointed out where you can cut away some of the historical perspective and really focus on the scene and give us some really good stuff to care about now. And you can fill us in on some of the backstory later once we care about the characters a little more.
Or imply it through, dispersed bits here and there.
In conversation, in things the character sees or feels, or in even internal monologue at times. You can convey a lot of that information.
And contextually triggered memories, perhaps,
Sure. Just like the one with the brother, that one we talked about was contextually triggered and was more personal, and I was not as bothered by reading it by any means. And the second point of criticism that I have is you have a good premise here with the whole kind of Cinderella style thing, but I'm really looking for it to go in a new direction. I get the.
If there's some glass slippers in this story, I am
Oh
gonna
my gosh.
punch something.
There's a freaking magical pumpkin. There's not a magical pumpkin in this story yet, but this is the kind of story where I'm reading it and I'm going, okay, I'm on board and I like what you're doing, but I need to see this take a direction that I haven't seen before for me to really get into it.
Is it kind of like, I've seen this kind of thing before, it doesn't turn me off, but you're kind of on probation, I'm going to see what you do with it?
Yeah, it's like if you're early on in your book, you have like the young boy training montage. I'm like, okay, I'm into it, but you gotta give me something that I can really latch onto here.
Yeah, it's like there's almost a curve of interest. If you imagine like an up and down kind of hill sort of mathematical curve, it's like at the beginning, potentially very little to no interest going into it, and like as you start reading it, it's like, oh, more and more and more and more interest. And then in a book like this, like you get to the peak pretty quickly. And then, depending on what happens after this sort of familiar beginning, you could either go way down and plunge down again, or you could kind of, maybe plateau for a little bit and then go up again, maybe. But it definitely depends on what you do with it.
Right. There's a reason Cinderella stories are popular and liked, because
I
they're
was
easy
going
to
to say that
understand
earlier.
and identify with. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. It's like, yes, it's a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason. It's a very common source of tension and conflict that people can identify with, and it's sort of this baked in sort of story that underlies this scenario that she finds herself in, and that makes it interesting. But the story itself that grows out of that has to justify the existence of the beginning, or else it's just kind of another one of those same things.
Right. And based on the depth here, there's a few elements that are certainly there's some stuff here that I could really see her going with and being really good, in particular because she's coming from a position of power, quote unquote, and losing it, and more so than Cinderella was. She was kind of always downtrodden. There's maybe something for her to gain back of her own accord, almost.
Or it could relate to that thing I was talking about. Like maybe she realizes that she doesn't act, or the reasons she wanted power and kind of to be in this position weren't, maybe her journey through this story is realizing that wasn't something that was actually worthwhile, and she finds some other source of meaning or inspiration in her life, kind of thing.
You know what I want to see? I want to see this kind of story, but like the Cinderella character decides to run off on her own because she's fed up with the situation, and she ends up being like forming her own army and coming back and like taking over everything and ruling as like an evil queen.
That sounds terrifying.
That'd be a fun twist.
That sounds terrifyingly like the new Alice in Wonderland movies.
You're not wrong.
Or like the new adaptation of like The Huntsman or something.
Yeah. No, Disney beat me to it.
Yeah, I was going to say, that sounds really dangerous.
Once again, Disney beat me to the punch.
I mean, you could do that. I'm sure there's a good way to do that. I just don't think those movies were very
No, it's
good.
been done. I can't do it. Can't touch it.
Oh, no.
So that's it. That's an interesting title, too. The book is called Seraph's Atlas. So that gives me something to look like. I'm interested.
That is an intriguing title. Yeah, I like that. I like the name Seraph, too.
It's a good one. It's a good mix of a fantasy along with something that sounds like it's not
somewhat
that
familiar. Yeah, one of my characters who I've had in mind since I've first had the first idea for this story a long time ago was Syrinx, Syrinx, and that's a character from Greek mythology. But I also heard it first in a Rush song, and I thought it was super cool.
Which Rush song, Vito?
Oh god, it's a We Are the Peace.
Well,
gosh, which one
I guess
is that?
it's not fair to say what song. It's more
2112.
Like yeah. So that's it for this. For the sort of chapter critique. Thank you, Katie, for sending it in. I enjoyed reading it and giving you some thoughts. To be clear, sometimes when I write these reviews and critiques and stuff and send people, I feel like I come off as more critical than is necessarily deserved, and that's mostly because it's a lot easier to point out negatives than it is to point out every positive. So just there's almost always more positive than negative, and I really enjoyed reading this. So Katie, thank you for sending it in.
Yeah, I feel the same way whenever I critique something. I feel like I come off as more negative in my tone than I intend to be. But usually I find a way. Usually I'll sum up my response. I like making comments in line, kind of throughout a document.
Yeah, me
it is.
too.
And then at the very end, I'll sum up my thoughts, and usually there I'll sort of point out more of the good stuff. So people are like reading through the inline comments, going, "Oh man, he thinks this sucks. He thinks oh."
Oh, he actually likes it. Cool.
Yeah,
I am awesome.
Well,
After all.
well, maybe not awesome, but at least okay.
Yeah. Sometimes.
Nice. Yeah, we should probably go ahead and wrap up there. I've got to run to work. Johnny's got to
Run to a baby.
change more diapers, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of those. It's like at least 10 times a day.
Are you guys using paper or cloth?
Cloth just sounds like the worst thing ever.
Well, we used to use those for the girls, and I've definitely used some of them before, and they're not too
Yeah.
bad, you know.
I don't know. It's still a lot of laundry.
Yeah, it's a lot of poop in the laundry, that's for sure.
Yeah, and plus a lot of people have given us diapers already, so we're
Okay.
burning through those way faster than I ever imagined we would, but whatever.
Nice. Well, I'm sure we will continue to see Andy's progress on the grams, and you guys can probably keep track of him there, as well as the rest of our doings and goings on, Alaska fires and all kinds of craziness.
That's another story we have to tell at some point, like your crazy Alaska adventures.
Yeah, it was pretty fun, but yeah, it's probably for another time.
And on that cliffhanging note, we must part.
That's the cliffhanger sound.
Is it, though?
No.
I thought that's the triumphant sound.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the cliffhanger sound would be. I mean, it's not really the bum bum bum. It's more like the.
I think you invert it.
Oh no!
Ba, ba, ba.
Hey, there you go. Actually,
That's the one.
that's pretty good. Yeah, I like that.
Nailed it. So, if you guys would like to email the show, including sending us little tidbits or chapters that you would like us to critique, you can send those along to wbapodcast@gmail.com. Katie actually sent us this one as a direct message on Reddit, which is nice and everything. You can find us on Reddit at WBA_podcast. On all the social medias, generally speaking, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and whatnot, we are World Builders Anonymous. And you can find our website, www.worldbuildersanonymous.com. We post some stuff on there sometimes. Hopefully we'll post more in the future, but I'm a little busy right now, and Vito is too, so deal with it. Also review our show on iTunes if you want to. We'd appreciate it. Again, don't know if it means anything or does anything, but, you know, numbers being bigger than other numbers is cool, so do that.
People say it does, so I have to believe that it does. I believe anything people
everything.
say. Yeah.
I was going to say the exact same thing.
I don't verify anything. That's not true.
It's on the internet. It's true.
Anyway, thanks for listening, guys. We will see you later.
Bye.
That was some ASMR for me.
This show is sponsored in part by Audible. Visit worldbuildersanonymous.com/audible to check out what the guys are listening to right now and to receive a free audiobook.